Welcome to the Saturday Night Mashup. Join myself, Jason Lavigne, and our panelist, Jeff Evely, to speak about what's trending in the news this week. Our guests of the week, David Krayden, Chet Chisholm, and Vlad the Impaler Tepes. I gave you a nice nickname there, brother. How you guys doing?
Good.
Outstanding.
Excellent.
That's great. Can't complain.
I couldn't find a picture of you, Vlad, so I put Vlad. When I wrote Vlad Tepes on Google, Vlad the Impaler, the original Dracula, comes up. So,
well, there's a reason for that. There's a reason.
I figured as much because there was nothing else that came up. So, we got a historian in the group, right?
Yeah, more or less.
I think you mean the savior of Romania.
Sure,
Exactly.
sure.
A very, very misunderstood character. Somebody, I mean, we got a British novelist who turned a hero into a monster. But he's exactly.
He's complex, but he's a hero.
Of course, Jeff, you knew about that, right?
I think it's
something you don't know?
Sheepies, actually. Vlad Sheepies.
Tepes.
So, guys, let's start by doing a quick roundtable. I'll start to my left. Jason, you want to go?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jason Lavigne. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show. I am also the host of the Lavigne Show, where I go ahead and try and collect information and share it with you all. I do a lot of one-on-one interviews. I seem to be getting into the weeds of some things, but at the right time, I will find the interview and have it. I know all of these gentlemen on the screen. All of them been on my show at least once, possibly a lot more. And I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks as we dig into the Universal Ostrich Farm, what's going on there, talking to the people who've been silenced, like the experts who the courts wouldn't listen to, and bring that stuff forward because the narrative out there is strong. And we know got to combat things exactly like that. So, Nico, thanks very much for putting this show together with me. And I'm looking forward to ruffling a lot of feathers, and especially if they're ostrich.
David? David can follow up with that. David Krayden?
I'm David Krayden. I'm the host of Krayden's Right. Airs daily, 7 days a week at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. I also join Nico Wednesday nights at 6:30 as we talk about conservative issues of the week. And I'm the national correspondent for the Post Millennial and Blaze Media as a parliamentary bureau. And I write weekly for Human Events as a political columnist. And when I have some time, I do 2 or 3 articles a week for Substack and current events. So I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for the invite, both you and Nico and Jason.
Absolutely. Vlad?
So I have been working for the last several years with the good people at Rare Foundation USA, which is RAIRfoundation.com. And they're a wonderful group of people, and they're doing astonishing work. They're actually becoming quite effective. They've caused a few policies to change in Texas that actually really matter. The governor's noticed them and has acted on some of the issues that they've raised. And I have my own site, vladtepesblog.com, and where I put my own look at the events around the world, and have been doing so for about 19 years.
Chet?
Hey, so I'm a paramedic, currently taking a break from that. I've done a bunch of work with the National Citizens Inquiry. I helped as one of the initial volunteers with it. And I do a fair amount with Viva Fry behind the scenes. I'm what he refers to as his mole on the inside. So anytime he talks about his man in Canada trapped behind the rainbow iron curtain, that would be me. Yeah, I kind of hang out in the back room mostly.
Not today, though. Not today.
No.
You're right front and center. Jeff?
Hey, I'm Jeff Evely. I'm one of the OGs of Veterans for Freedom from the convoy. Rolling Thunder, James Top, 1 Million March for Children, 2025 MP candidate with the People's Party. And most recently, I walked into the woods.
Yeah, that's it. Took a walk in the woods. My name's Nico Lagan. I am a political commentator. I host a show with David Krayden on Wednesdays. I have my own show every day, the Political Orphans with a lefty atheist. So as a Christian conservative, it makes for interesting content. And yeah, I'm a men's rights activist too. So I do a lot of shows in the US, pissing off feminists and the trans with my men are needed narrative. So that's what I do. So welcome to the show, guys. Welcome. Everybody's going to be for an interesting panel. But, let's start with a subject that Jason wanted to bring up. Simple question for you guys. Should Antifa be labeled as a terrorist organization in Canada?
Yes.
And well, there you go. You should start then.
Well, Antifa has, ever since its inception, back in the 30s, has done terrorist stuff. They're the kind of the pseudo militant wing of the Communist Party in, I believe it was in Germany at the time. But that's when they say it's it's just an idea. No, it's not. It's been around for almost 100 years. And it's just kind of, poking its head up in the last 10, 15 years. If you follow any of the work of Andy No or Tim Pool's covered a lot of it. Carl Benjamin or Sargon of Akkad is where I first learned of Antifa. And, I've been watching them just, being degenerate goons for at least a decade. There's kind of like an inside joke amongst people who are opposed to Antifa. It's the drinking the milkshake is a sign of victory, because what Antifa loves to do is they like to go to say McDonald's. They'll get a milkshake, they'll pour some of it out, and then they'll fill the rest up with concrete mix and stir it up and throw it at people, because it's it just looks like a McDonald's cup. But they throw it on people, and it looks like they got hit with a milkshake, but then it causes chemical burns. And so they've thrown them at anyone that's said anything, whether it was Carl Benjamin, Andy No has gotten it bad. But what Carl Benjamin started doing is he, for those who don't know him, he would be what you would call formerly what you would call a classical liberal out of the UK. But whenever Antifa would show up, he would just sit there and drink a milkshake in front of them as a fuck you. But yeah, it's like they carry out violent attacks. They all dress in black bloc, so it's harder to pin down which person. It gives the deniability in court. It's which guy was it? They're all dressed in black. You don't know which guy threw the rocks at you or beat you with a bike lock. They do stochastic terrorism, other forms of violence. They, it's, it's the same thing they've done for 100 years.
Okay, so Vlad has a lot of experience as well in Ottawa, being a reporter covering issues. Vlad, what's your take? Antifa, is it real, and should it be a terrorist organization?
So I'm going to take both those questions as too obvious to give a direct answer. I mean, if the definition of terrorism is committing violence against soft targets to achieve a political objective, then they're obviously a terrorist group. And should they be declared a terrorist group? Well, the question I would ask is, why haven't they? They've been operating for a really long time and breaking all kinds of Canadian laws. I don't even just mean the obvious stuff. I mean, I went to one demo where I knew Antifa would be facing off against a bunch of really nice sort of middle-aged women that were protesting for freedom of speech. And I knew Antifa would be there. And I knew they'd be intimidating us, and they'd be treading as close to the line of illegality, never mind illegality, of being arrested as possible. And I printed out for the benefit of the police all kinds of copies of the Canadian law that says you cannot wear a mask at a political demonstration. And this is pre-COVID, years before COVID. And so I handed it out to police, and I said, maybe you guys should think about arresting these guys because they're harassing and intimidating people while covering their faces. That is illegal. But it never was. So the question I would ask is, why across North America and Western Europe has Antifa been able to act with total and complete impunity? And the answer is probably that Antifa is a proxy army for the leftist governments across the West. And I've got video of the German government admitting they financed them and asking for more financing. And we've got all of us have seen much footage from Canadian NDP MPs talking about how great Antifa is. The fact is, Antifa is a Bolshevik, a proxy army for communist and Comintern governments across the West, and especially under the Biden, whoever the Otto Penn administration, because they literally took over cities. They had a branch office called BLM, but they took over cities and made them what they call autonomous zones. I mean, and somehow that wasn't insurrection. So I mean, like I guess my answer is yes. They're terrorist groups should be declared as such. But the real issue is why haven't they up till now? Like what's going on right now with Trump's newest declaration about bringing in the military and treating it as a military problem? It's like so obvious to do that. Why has it taken this long? Who's behind it?
Excellent. Excellent questions, Jeff. We got this one.
Sure. So I think the breakdown is a little different between the United States and Canada. In the United States, I would agree with Vlad's assessment, first of all, that these are effectively the terrorist wings of the establishment left-wing parties, namely the Democrats in the United States and the Liberals in Canada. In the United States, it's a little harder to pin down. There are a lot of accusations that Act Blue or Open Societies are funding these groups, but we don't have like definitive connections. At the end of the day, it's just this is the kind of thing they're usually suspected of doing. Most likely, they have multiple funding sources, but in Canada, we do know that the Canadian Anti-Hate Network self-identify as Antifa, and there was that court ruling. I was just reading about this before we came on, but there was a court ruling where a former CANH or whatever it is, Canadian Anti-Hate Network member, his name is Richard Warman, was trying to sue Jonathan and Barbara Kay for talking about how Canadian Anti-Hate Network affiliates with Antifa and they support them. They have their handbooks on their recommended reading on their website, and they provide like coordination and this kind of thing. So they were saying these things about them on Twitter, and this Richard Warman tried to sue them for defamation, but the ruling itself said that Warman's own evidence was that he and Canadian Anti-Hate Network were part of the Antifa movement. And the Canadian Anti-Hate Network got $200,000 in grant funds from the government of Canada in 2024, and the Liberal Party would not comment on whether or not they would be receiving money in the future when Juno News reached out to them for comment. So, yeah, I mean, it's a little more cut and dry in Canada. It really does appear to be the case that Antifa is the terrorist wing of the Liberal Party of Canada. Good luck getting the Canadian Anti-Hate Network designated as a terrorist organization while they're receiving government funding. But that's kind of what needs to happen and could happen here. What the problem they have in the U.S., though, like why it hasn't happened yet, is not so much with the terrorist designation as it has to do with the group designation. So the law is just kind of not set up to handle this. And the people who put this together, whoever they may be, understand that. So it's the Antifa is decentralized in order to evade U.S. law. And so it makes it really hard to designate them as a terrorist group because, they keep saying they're not a group, they're an ideology, and there may be a lot of truth to that. In the U.S., it's really hard to get that designation, but in Canada, we have the advantage of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network being the mastermind of Antifa, effectively in Canada, and the disadvantage that we have is that they're government funded. So, we'll see if Pierre Poilievre is going to be calling for them to be designated as a terrorist organization anytime soon.
Well, that's a good segue to David. So, David, what are your thoughts? The Conservative Party aren't being connected to them, but maybe the Conservative Party can speak out about them. What are your thoughts there?
I would like to see that day occur when the Conservative Party has the courage to say that. But it's any sort of branding of the Antifa movement organization as a terrorist organization is almost a moot point, because it's not going to happen anytime soon under Mark Carney or the Liberals, who have been benefiting from them. How many times has Charlie Angus been out there talking about how wonderful Antifa is? How many Democrats said Antifa doesn't even exist? And of course, if you know anything about C.S. Lewis, that's exactly how the devil convinces people that he's not dangerous, that he doesn't exist. Antifa only really exists to terrorize, but not just conservative protesters, but the general populace. They are an organization that tries to insist it's the conservative protesters who are demonstrating peacefully who are the problem, and not themselves. And these people are clearly a danger to society, but they serve a vital purpose to the left. And as long as they serve that vital purpose, they will be sustained and enriched by the coffers that the left controls. I remember doing a story for the Daily Caller when I was the Ottawa bureau chief there about how Tides Foundation was funding Antifa to a very large degree. And of course, that's a Soros-backed organization. Canada doesn't like to think it's part of the same problem that exists in the United States. And Antifa, of course, took over Portland, Oregon. And I believe as we speak, they're doing that right now, because Donald Trump has sent troops to Portland to restore order. They took over Seattle, Washington. And I actually was there at the time, and where they had the gall to declare this basically a Bolshevik core in the center of the city of Seattle. And of course, the mayor approved of that because she was benefiting from Antifa's support. So in terms of a direct answer, yes, of course, it's so obvious. This is a prima facie terrorist organization that will continue to operate for as long as the left thinks it should be operating. But Jason, I have to say, will Pierre Poilievre declare it a terrorist organization? He seems to like to limit those terrorist organizations to Islamic militancy. So I don't know if he would even move in that direction, even though in Ottawa here, Antifa has infiltrated all of the pro-Palestine demonstrations to the point where they're really not even about that anymore. They're about Antifa objectives. And that is what this organization is all about. When Pierre Poilievre has the courage to stand up and say these ostriches in British Columbia should not be killed because there's no scientific basis for that, I think I'll have the faith to believe he'll also stand up and say Antifa is a terrorist organization that should not be operating in this country.
Don't hold your breath,
Fantastic.
David.
Nico,
Don't
same
hold
question
your
to you,
breath. Bro, David and I record content all the time, so all I'm going to say, David, don't hold your breath, because you know that's not going to happen. And if it does, I will admit wrong, but there's a few things I wanted to mention, because as Jeff, there are some ties from Antifa to the Canadian Hate Network, but there was also people claiming that, the Canada First protest that happened in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, some people that were there, that showed up before everybody, showed the police having conversations with Antifa before the protests even started. And I have at least 2 different sources that claim that, and they came on my show to talk about it. So that's problematic. That kind of proves the point that they are not only working for the government through the funding of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, because as I looked at this week, they've received about $1 million from the federal government in the past 5 years. That doesn't count all the other grants that they've received, but black on white, you can easily find that on the government website, about $1 million to the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. There's connection to Antifa, and they seem to have been working with the police in Toronto at the Canada First protest. It's another thing I find interesting is, if you guys remember, the climate change protesters, the BLM protesters, now the Free Palestine protesters are all the same people. They're all the same people. And what do they all have in common? Antifa. So they're all the same people tagging along with everything out there, plus the trans agenda, as long as they don't parade at the same time, because Antifa seems to even go after leftist people like the Pride Parade, because that's what they did in Ottawa a few weeks ago, which absolutely ironic if you ask me. I really love to see it. It was great to see a leftist protest block another leftist protest, but all to say that it seems very, very problematic, but where I find it could be difficult to label them as a terrorist group or even identify the leading heads is where do you find them? Because as you said, Jeff, in the US, they say that it's just a movement. They don't have any people. They're like mini cells all over the place that have the same ideology. But do we have groups in Canada to even identify if we wanted to label them as a terrorist organization?
Well, that is kind of. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Jeff.
No, go ahead, Jeff, and then I'll give my answer.
Yeah, sorry. That is kind of what I'm suggesting is that one thing we have that works in our favor here in Canada, as opposed to the United States, is that in the U.S. they can't point to like a belly button on the organization to be able to call it an organization. That's the issue. It's everybody agrees that they're engaging in terrorism, but to give them the designation, they have to be organized. That's what the decentralization is for. However, in Canada, we do have a focal point, and that's the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. So, I mean, if they're providing the spiritual guidance and support and, coaching or whatever it is that they're doing, then I think we could designate the Canadian Anti-Hate Network a terrorist organization. But good luck getting Pierre Poilievre to call that out. That's kind of what I think.
Could I just remind everybody that the Conservative Party, along with the Parliament of Canada, unanimously voted to make the Proud Boys a terrorist entity without mentioning Antifa. And I cannot stress how important that is to this conversation. They were able to look at a group that was not a terrorist group, that defended protesters from Antifa intimidation, that were just a nice bunch of guys who formed a young men's drinking club that believed in being married, raising your children well, being a responsible. They're essentially like Vets for Freedom. They're a very good, great group of young men who believed in personal responsibility, and they got voted by the Conservative Party and everybody else a terrorist entity. So, just saying, we can do it.
It started out a lot goofier than that.
I'll answer the question. It'll come to you next, Chet.
Yeah.
And I'll answer the question as well. Of course, they're terrorists, something. And as Jeff pointed out and others pointed out, it's tough to call them an organization. When Trump came out with that, you could see the community notes right away were saying, no, this is not a group, it's not an organization, they don't have a structure, this is false. And anytime I would comment on it, I would get that as well. For example, some people would say, well, they don't have hats. Like a MAGA hat is what makes it a group, right? And they don't have a website. I supply a website where it says Antifa Red Deer. And they're like, well, who's the leader then? Like, that's kind of the point. They're decentralized. It's just like saying organized crime or mafia. We all know it exists, but they're regional and they have their own little groups regionally with the same idea. Now, if they were truly what they say they are, which is anti-fascism, then why are they not standing up against the liberal government who's taking away guns, taking away speech, locking up political opponents, fighting in a fascist type of way and building a fascist type of government, but yet they're not protesting against that. So they're obviously not against fascism. They're supporting fascism. To them, fascism means I don't like you and you're hurting the people that supply my funding and my needs to be here. And that's pretty clear. And just like being called a transphobe or homophobe and all this kind of stuff, I'm being called fascist all the time. And I'm pro-fascist now because I'm against Antifa. So you can see it does exist. They have a flag. They have a costume. I don't want to call it an outfit. They have a costume. They're international. It's not just Canada or US. It's all over the place. And I absolutely think Trump's on the right track when he says we need to take a closer look at George Soros. Good, please do. And here in Canada, we had a MP in Lethbridge, Rachel Thomas or something like that, Thompson. She's calling it out now, finally. So there are some Conservative Party members who are calling it out. I do want her to also take a look at Barbara Perry. He's definitely someone else that needs to be looked at for this kind of thing. And absolutely. And if we don't crack it down, if we don't stop it here in Canada, I think the U.S. may consider us a international security threat, because if they designated Antifa as terrorist, but Canada doesn't, and Antifa kind of comes to Canada to keep growing and keep funding a lot like the Calistanis are doing, I think eventually the U.S. are going to say we are a national security threat and start taking additional means in that way. So those are my kind of thoughts around that. Canada should take it seriously. I don't think this government will. Some conservatives are speaking up, and hopefully most or all of them will do so as well. Chet, sorry for cutting in there.
No, that's cool. So just touching on what you said, their flag, for those who don't know, it's I forget how they're laid on top of each other, but it's two red and black flags. And the black one is for anarchism and the red one is for communism. So they're a bunch of radical anarchists and communists who, go out and bash you with bike locks. And the other thing I was going to mention earlier is like the Proud Boys being labeled a terrorist organization is ridiculous because it started out as just like a drinking club created by Gavin McInnes, who helped start up Vice Media. Like, he's a comedian and he thought it was funny. And it was just this goofy, like, kind of like drinking club, and it kind of like expanded into like something a little more than that. But like at the time, like it wasn't much more than that. It was just kind of like a guys getting together kind of thing. Like it was almost a meme to start, and now they've labeled it a terrorist organization, which is like, I can't think of any time they've actually carried out any, political violence. They may have gotten to a fist fight with Antifa, but that's, who doesn't?
But the reason they were labeled a terrorist organization is because they interfered with Antifa's intimidation of anybody who's counter-narrative.
Yeah.
See, I mean, again, I look at everything very, very simply. There's the only crime left in the West is being counter-narrative. So the government tells you what you must believe, whether the vaccines are safe and effective, or Islam is a religion of peace. And if you go against it, if you say that it isn't, or you quote Quran, or you quote science that says that vaccines aren't safe and effective, if you stand against any of the government narratives, you're a criminal. You're a thought criminal. You're a speech criminal. And Antifa is the proto thought police. And that's why they're not a terrorist organization, and the Proud Boys were, because they were defending us from those narrative enforcement mechanism, the physical street thugs who enforce narrative.
It's a fraternity. That's what it was. It was a fraternity, and I can remember when Gavin McInnes actually announced its commencement. And we're talking about a fraternity. Like, to get into it, you have to be surrounded by your buddies and get punched in the guts, and they're not going to stop until you can name 25 breakfast cereals. They also have very strict rations for masturbating. So I mean, like, it's a fraternity. It was a joke, and certainly they did show up for the Battle of Portland. That one time, go watch that sometime. That was very entertaining. Rufio knocked out that thug who tried to hit him with a telescopic baton. It was glorious. But anyway, the Canadian government used January 6th as the launch pad to declare the Proud Boys a terrorist organization, and now we have Trump come out and he has pardoned the January 6ers. So Proud Boys were never a terrorist organization in the United States, and so we have it completely flipped around here, where the U.S. is going after Antifa, but here we are, of course not, and we still have the Proud Boys banned because we live under liberating tolerance, which was the Marxist professor Marcuse's concept of jackboot for anything anti-communist and carte blanche for the left. And speaking of anti-communists, like, anti-fascists are communists. That's what they are. That's why that's why when you look at them, it's not hypocritical of them to support all of the same policies as the socialists in our government, with the gun confiscation and all of the same kind of social policies, because they're communists. And this all goes back to the 30s, of course. That's why they play Ciao Bella. That's basically the anthem for Antifa right now. It was used by the communists in Italy when they were fighting with the fascists to overthrow the fascist regime and all this stuff. But it was also they
Yeah.
could take power. So that's why we see that. That's what they do, is they just label us fascists, because anybody to the right of Stalin, they will call a fascist. That's kind of their paradigm. You have to understand that they think fascism is right wing, but it is objectively left wing. It's to the left of center. But if you're a communist and you're looking to your right, that's what you're going to see as a fascist.
I just
David?
wanted to pick up on something Vlad was saying there. We live in a narco tyranny right now in Canada, and if you do not subscribe to the government's narrative, to what the government wants you to believe in, you are the terrorist. And I don't remember the last time any Proud Boys were terrorizing Canadians, and why the Conservatives did that beyond sucking up to the Liberals, as they love to do here in Ottawa, is beyond me. But if I see so many terrorist so much terrorist intentionality from this Liberal government, I would label the Canadian Food Inspection Agency as terroristic this week and what they're doing. The RCMP is increasingly terroristic in how they operate. This is increasingly a secret police force that is used against people who disagree with Mark Carney, who disagreed with Justin Trudeau, who are opposed to the Liberal government, who don't think we have to have a vaccine, who don't think we have to necessarily believe in all of the tenets of the Liberal regime. And so the very notion of terrorism has been redefined by the Liberal government, and they have turned everything on its head. We are living in a topsy-turvy society that no longer sees right from wrong and has made black white. And I talk about this every day because this is where we're living. And we are just a few steps behind the UK in terms of censorship, in terms of complete suppression of free speech. And I hope I haven't anticipated another question, but in terms of a digital currency that will control us all.
You know, it's interesting you say
100%
that,
Nico.
because well, there was a question I wanted to take. Somebody, Laurie Dodd, was asking, has anyone in Britain stood up to Keir Starmer's digital ID mandatory to work? And I just wanted to talk about a guy that's come, Montgomery Toms. If you guys don't know who that guy is, he makes some incredible content. He's really, he's like a Billboard Chris in the UK, but he doesn't just stick to the trans agenda. He sticks to everything that is counter narrative. So Laurie Dodd, 100%. Montgomery.toms on Instagram. Great dude. Reached out to him. I'm gonna try to have him on my show because I love what he's doing. But he's been talking about digital ID for weeks now, and he's very outspoken. Like, he is a brilliant young man. So I wanted to use this to ask you guys a question, and even then, David Krayden, you kind of brought it up too. So thank you. You kind of gave me the perfect segue to say we all know what's going on in the UK right now with the digital ID. We know that in the US they're trying to do something similar. There are talks in Canada, like the Liberal government's been working on it for years, ever since COVID actually. They've been working on a digital ID behind the scene to identify people that are vaccinated so that you can cross certain international borders. What's Daniel Smith, as much as I love Daniel Smith, she's talking about a digital ID right now in Alberta. So what are you guys thinking about what's going on in the UK? Because we all know, like, if we look at Bill C2, Bill C9, and now the government has announced that they will retable another Bill C63, it's just a matter of time before they put a digital ID on the page, right? They just want to censor us first. Then we know that digital ID is the next thing. So what are your thoughts?
Okay.
I've been following that for a long time. As I mentioned, Carl Benjamin before, like his work and the podcast of the Lotus Eaters with all the guys that work under him. They've been covering it for a long time. I've talked to Carl before. He's a great guy. But it's dystopian. It's the same thing as they did with COVID. Is they're gonna hold the carrot and stick approach. We'll either lure you with the carrot or we'll beat you with the stick. Like they're gonna try to force you to do it one way or the other. Like with the vaccine mandates, it's like I know a lot of people like myself included, who didn't want to take it, but you're trying to save your job, your livelihood, or I had a friend of mine was worried she was going to lose custody of her children over it. So, and that's what they will likely do. Because in the UK, as you mentioned, it's Keir Starmer wants to make it a requirement to go to work, and there's not many of us that can afford to not go to work anymore. It's a very, very small number. So yeah, where the UK goes, we follow suit. It seems to be, which is not a pleasant thought, that's for sure. Our culture has always been like very tied into like the United Kingdom, and unfortunately, it's still that way in a bad sense. So I don't.
Vlad?
I'm.
Oh, sorry, Chet. I thought you were done.
Oh, I said I was just going to finish with saying like I fully expect this to come down the pipeline probably in the not too distant future. Like they've kind of been talking about it anyway, and it'll be bad news bears when it gets here.
Vlad?
So I'm going to here's 2 cents, but at the same time, I'd like to build on what David said, because when we talk about each one of these individual issues, whether it's the vaccine or the digital ID or whatever, these are all, in my opinion, these are what Stephen Coughlin would call dialectical bombs. And while we're standing under a dialectical bomb site, trying to figure out how to cope with what's just happening, the plane is 10 miles, 100 miles farther, and it's dropping new bombs. We can never keep up. So if we look at the purpose of all of this is deracination, okay? The purpose of all this is the utter and total obliteration of our identity. It is dividing us among as many issues as it possibly can, while it is completely making it impossible for us to get together in a group and oppose it, right? So, you're talking about digital ID, I will get to it, but the Century Initiative is the great dialectical bomb, the great destruction of Canada that no one talks about, but it's right in front of us. Centuryinitiative.ca. It's a government, non-governmental program, which is an NGO, government-operated NGO, which is illegal, with the intention of which is to bring Canada's population up to 100 million people by the end of this century through mass immigration. Right? Not through encouraging us to have families. They used feminism to absolutely obliterate the Western concept of the family. And it worked very well. A lot of men don't want the risk of being romantically involved because it'll destroy them. And women, hate men and so on and so on. That was all a very Marxist attack called feminism. So we've wrecked that. So now we're bringing in we're going to triple our population through mass immigration of people who do not relate to us. We will not have a common frame of reference. We will not be able to get together with them and fight the government. But that's where all this money goes when they talk about, $50 million being given to gay turtles for a production of Hamlet. It's not what it's for. It is to bring all of these immigrants in and to pay for them because they don't have jobs. Not everybody can work for Uber, right? So the digital ID, if you look at, I understand digital currency a lot better. It's the same thing. It's total central control of everything you can do, what you can buy, how much you can buy. If you oppose a state narrative or how much meat you can eat will all be based on this. And by the way, for anybody who's thinking that it'll solve any problems, yesterday, if anybody was at a grocery store, I don't know how far this went, but certainly in Ottawa. Yesterday, if anybody was at a grocery store, they were suddenly not able to process Interact bank card purchases. You could only use cash for the moment, and you could use credit cards. So the lineups were all through the store, and people were just abandoning meat and other refrigerated and frozen items in the aisles because they'd been waiting so long in the aisle to pay for stuff. And if they got to the cash and they only had a bank card, they couldn't buy it. So having these systems will not provide secure solutions. Won't. right? All it will do is give more centralized state control of everything you do. So again, my answer to that and a lot of other stuff is this is about the deracination of Canada as a people, as a culture, as a history, as an identity, even as a sex, as individuals. Are you male or female, right? That's a guy in Switzerland just took jail rather than pay a fine because he said, responding to some trans activist, that in 100 years from now, if you dig up skeletons, all you will see is male and females. For that, he was found guilty of offending somebody and was fined, wouldn't pay the fine, went to jail. Good for him.
I want to add to this. It's funny you say that, Vlad, because I was at the store yesterday, at the grocery store, exactly at the time that you're referring to, and I'm in Montreal. Same thing. Announcement on the speakerphone. Just they were only taking cash. They weren't taking anything else. So no cards was working. So it seems it's not just something that happened in Ottawa. It was happening here in Montreal too. That's organized. Like, you're not going to convince me. I come from the telecom world. There's no way that banking companies don't have all those servers backed up all over the place. That's why they host with companies like Google and Amazon, so that to make sure that those things never go down. So it had to be controlled. And the fact that it happened in Montreal and Ottawa, I don't believe in coincidences, sir. I do not.
What an interesting way to get cash out of people's pockets for the last time and not put it back into their pockets. What an interesting way to get it done. Jeff, go ahead.
I guess perhaps I'm not as concerned about the digital ID specifically as maybe some of the other folks in here. Vlad, I think that was a pretty great take that you just gave there with the reference to Steve Coughlin and the dialectical bomb. And yeah, this is one of the things I kind of shelved it. I'm not really railing against this right now because, as Andrew Breitbart said, the politics is downstream from the culture, and the culture is absolutely screaming blue murder about digital ID to the point that we even have Pierre Poilievre coming out against it. So it's already like mainstream politicians are saying, no, we're not going in this direction. Even Danielle Smith said that. And I think what she did is she brought like a digital ID card that was just kind of a consolidation of some other things. But I was looking at it and I was going, oh, this still isn't like, it's not tied to your bank account or it's not a currency. It probably facilitates your personal management of your own medical file and things like this. So it seemed like it was actually an improvement, and people are still screaming about it. So I'm like, okay, I think we got digital ID covered, at least in Canada here. On the other side of the pond, they tend to be a little bit more authoritarian, but even though we are stuck with this Westminster system that tends to lend itself to totalitarianism much more readily than the American Republic, I think we're somewhere between. We're on a Westminster system, so like a UK system, but culturally we're more American, like we're North American. We don't sound anything like the Brits. We sound a lot more like, I'm an East Coast guy and I sound more like a guy from Boston than I do a guy from, Wales or whatever. But I think that one, as far as the digital ID goes, I think we're okay there, and we need to start worrying more about the kinds of things that Vlad was just talking about with the Centuries Initiative and the Chinese Communist Party, the radicalism that we see absolutely replete throughout our own society. A lot of these infiltrators that have embedded themselves within government and our institutions. Those are the kinds of things that we really need to be focused on. And it's a question of prioritizing. I've assigned a lower priority in terms of my attention to the digital ID. I think we're going to be okay on that one.
Well, I have to completely disagree with that because this is a uniform action. Because it's a globalist action. And the digital ID is being introduced in the UK, Australia, and Canada at the same time. Mark Carney today said maybe. That means yes. The digital ID is part and parcel with the Online Harms Act. This is all happening to so-called great democracies at the same time. They're all falling one by one. And if Canada adopts a digital currency, it will not be some lesser form of evil. It will not somehow be less toxic than that which will be introduced in the UK or, say, France or Australia. It will be as bad because it's going to be a globalist mandate. And that's the intention here. And this is why this is all happening at the same time. And this is why Mark Carney is introducing not one, but two hate pieces of legislation in the fall session. We've seen the first. The Online Harms Act is right around the corner. Digital ID is going to be the next thing that's introduced. And it's all about complete government control, complete government surveillance of what you do, who you are, what you buy, what you think, what you watch. And that's the intention here. And it's going to affect us all in a very way. And it has to be opposed in a very vigorous fashion, because otherwise we will not stop there. And I don't even know where they have to stop after that. This country is so close to falling off the precipice into totalitarian rule that there really isn't much more this Liberal government has to do to enact that.
Now, for me, the digital ID conversation, especially being in Alberta. So, Jeff, there actually was two conversations or two announcements that maybe you heard one, but maybe not the other. So there was the Alberta wallet. When that came out, it was, we're going to consolidate your health information here. This is going to be easier for you. You can still get the old health card, but this health wallet, we're calling it the Alberta wallet, is going to be great. You're going to have a bunch of stuff available to you by doing that. And when she first came out with that, I'm like, oh no, here we go. We're getting started.
Yeah.
Then recently she came out with the One ID, the Alberta One ID. And it has your driver's license, your health, and citizenship. That's the one that really got my eyebrow up. Citizenship. What do we need citizenship on the ID for as a provincial level? It's fine, like, you know, if you're going to cross the border, you need to know that. So a couple of things could be happening. I'm speculating completely. Possibly in Alberta in the near future, your citizenship would be required to be known for services. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they're putting it on there. Maybe there's going to be an agreement where it can be used as a passport going forward because your citizenship is on there, which means Alberta will be sharing citizen data with the passport office at federal level, which will share it with international. Or maybe, and this is where I'm really leaning, because we saw this happen with the Alberta Health Services WEF partnership that used to exist. Maybe they're going after the most conservative area in Canada to see if they'll take it, because everywhere else will take it, no problem. If it's the conservative ones that fight back and push back hard enough, maybe it would be more difficult, but they can roll it out everywhere else. And if it does turn out to be, because if you look at the guidelines for the WEF and a global ID, they want it regional, like a state level or province level. Maybe this is the first step in that direction. But Jeff, for me, citizenship being put on that ID for the first time, it's the first time any driver's license or health card in Canada has citizenship also put on there. That raised an eyebrow for me. Until I saw that, I was more in line with you that it might be convenience. But with citizenship, I don't know why on a provincial level we needed that, unless it's one of those three things I laid out. Services are going to be divided by citizenship. They're going to use it as a passport, like a One ID, or it is going to be the rollout of all provinces doing something very similar, and Alberta is just a testing ground for that. Nico, you want to go, and then maybe we'll get a rebuttal from Jeff on that?
Yeah.
No, go, Jeff, because I have another point. Like I'm here to drive the conversation. If I have something to add, I will always add it. But right now, I'm curious to see what Jeff has to say, because I agree with you. I agree with Jason. I agree with David. I agree with Vlad. This, to me, is a no-brainer. This is pure control, 100%. No questions about it. There's a good reason why it's happening everywhere in the world. All I'm going to add is, I don't know if you guys heard about that, but about 5 days ago in Vietnam, the government erased 86 million bank accounts for non-compliant citizens who refused the digital ID. Basically, 86 million Vietnamese got debanked for refusing to take the digital ID. This is coming out. A lot of sources that I trust are talking about this. Obviously, our mainstream media will never approach that one with a 10-foot pole. But all to say that it's all connected. I totally agree with David that there's a good reason why Mark Carney's here destroying the economy when he was sold to us as the great economist. There's a good reason why he's destroying our relationship with the US. There's a good reason why he's part of the group, the WEF, that wants to have 100 million people in Canada by the end of the century. There's a good reason why he pushed Bill C2, Bill C9, and another Bill C63. The next step is the digital ID, but it's not a coincidence. So I'll let Jeff happen, and then I have a answer, and I have a question to wrap it up, and it goes with the conversation you and I, Jason, had today. We have great guests here, so I want to see if they're a bit smarter than I am, because I can't figure it out.
So the good reason is the CCP, and the Chinese play Go, whereas we play chess. And in chess, we're concerned with capturing the key piece on the board. It's analogous, the king. It's analogous to a capital city, like the race for Berlin was the end of the Second World War. But in Go, it's about capturing all of the pieces, all at the same time, dominating the entire board and making it so your opponent can't even move. So that's why it's happening in all Western nations. And I need to make a differentiation here between intent and ability, because what I'm talking about is ability. You guys are all talking about intent. I understand that the intent is to use currency and digital ID to enslave us, but is it plausible at this stage? That's kind of what I'm questioning, because the culture, like I said, is more American. It's North American here. Whereas over in Europe, it tends to be more socialist, and we had to rescue them from socialism in the 20th century. And Canada is somewhere between that and the United States. We tend to be much more socialist than the United States, for sure. But we've already seen so much momentum in the culture with the pushback on the digital ID. And I think that the case that Jason cited there, where the Alberta wallet was roundly rejected by Albertans, and then they said, "Oh, okay, well maybe this isn't the way to go," but something to facilitate services. And putting the citizenship on there in the current threat environment, I don't think is a terrible idea. But also, it can't be the case that they create an elevated threat environment and then crack down on digital ID and start bringing in like martial law and things like that. But I don't think that the citizenship portion really crosses the line to tyranny, but because I come from a security background and I like profiles. So, when we're looking for terrorists and we're looking for freeloaders, then it's nice to have a profile handy on their ID. There's an upside. There's always an upside to everything. But in terms of, I guess the case that I'm making in terms of why I've sort of shelved that particular battle in the current battle space there, the one on the digital ID, is because I think it's pretty much handled. Like the momentum is turning back in our favor, not just culturally, but politically. And I don't think that they're going to be able to implement their agenda. I understand that this is the intent, but it's a question of ability.
Fair enough, Nico.
Unless Vlad has something to say, because he's as a comment in the section said that he's phasing in and out of reality. So if you're with us, Vlad, do you have anything to say?
Well, I've always got stuff to say, but why don't you go ahead with your question, because I'm completely intrigued now.
And Vlad, what they're talking about is your camera. You come in and out, so your AI filter is kind of running low.
Yeah, it's weird.
I've
he's
got
not really here. He's just not really here. That's it. He's not really here. Well, the question that I have, it goes with the subject that we seem to be talking about today. Like it goes from you look at all the temporary worker that they're bringing in to take a lot of the low-hanging jobs. They're bringing mass immigration, censorship bill, digital IDs. And one of the things that my hill to die on is free speech. As a person, as a commentator, as somebody that creates content, that I lost everything for refusing a vaccine because a bunch of obese people told me that I was unhealthy and I was a danger to others. I lost my career over this, so ever since I had my middle fingers up, and I'm like, fuck you, you're not going to censor me, and that's the hill I want to die on. And considering the bills that are coming down the pipe, if those bills are passed, I'm screwed. I'm going to jail. I've been talking against this for 4 years, so there's no way in hell that I can stay in Canada. But the question that I've been puzzled over, something that I literally that I think about hours a day, every day, and I've been doing this for years, is how do we bring common sense individuals in Canada? No matter their political affiliations, because there are people on the left, in the middle, on the right that are common sense. We see the problems. We might have different solutions, but we agree on most of the problems that we're seeing. So what do you guys think would be the number one banner that we could all rally behind? What is the number one thing that the average common sense Canadian will stand up to say no more? And the reason I'm bringing this up is I still have the mentality of protesting, like putting movements, like Canadian-wide movements, similar to the Freedom Trucker that happened a couple of years ago. That was also I was part of. But yesterday I was on a call with Jeff Evely, and he was referring how the new way of fighting the government today, because they don't have to acknowledge you if you protest. They can simply ignore you, let it happen, and you're never in a system of court. You're never in the court system. You're never fighting your opponent face to face. But he took a walk in the woods on purpose to get a ticket because he knew it would give him virality. He knew that he would end up in court because the last time he tried, they just got rid of the case because there was no monetary consequences to your action. Now there are. You're going to get to face your opponent directly in the court of law. You're going to play their game, basically. And that's great. I fucking love you for doing it, brother. Absolutely love. I was laughing my ass off when I saw it because you had said it 2 days prior on our show that you were going to do this. So when I saw that, I was fucking laughing alone in the dark as I got up in the morning. But as you were saying yesterday, on Friday on the call that we were both on, it's good to fight them in their own system. But I don't want to wait for the censorship bills to pass in order to counter the censorship bill, because I don't have to do anything. They just need to look at my social media and they can backtrack me for years on my hate, right? So what do we do in a case like what we're facing right now, where we cannot wait for the censorship bill to be in place, for the digital ID to be put in place before we fight it? So how do we rally the troops, the common sense individuals out there to say, fuck no, we're not standing for this?
Well, let's jump to David first, because I think, David, your time is limited. Correct me if I'm wrong about that.
Yes, I can go over the hour here, but certainly, I think I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but I'll proceed anyway.
Is there common ground that we can all fight
together?
Yes.
I think free speech, I have to agree with you, Nico. Free speech is, for me, the deciding question here, because without free speech, we have no democracy. We have no human rights in this country. Free speech is foundational to Western democracy, whether it's Great Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or the United States. Free speech is the commonality. And when I talk to the people on my show that I've come to know, and in many cases really have admiration and deep affection for, it's been free speech that brought these people from being sometimes on the far left of the Democratic Party into our area of thinking, because they said, what's wrong with me? How can I possibly embrace a philosophy that is so anti-free speech, that insists I don't have a right to object. I cannot resist. I cannot say no. And I think of Naomi Wolf, I had on my show last week. I've had her on numerous times. I've really come to like Naomi, and we talk all the time now. And this is somebody I used to say, that's somebody I'll never have anything in common with. When she was working for Bill Clinton and Al Gore, and now she took the red pill during COVID, and the red pill for her was that she didn't have the right to express her opinion anymore, because when she did so, she was moved out of the way by the same left-wing people who once hailed her as a great feminist author, as a great left-wing author. She didn't have the right anymore, and she was completely removed from the conversation. and literally removed from the conversation by being kicked off social media. Oh, no more invites to the talk show circuit. Nothing. All of her friends deserted her. And what did she do? She decided to use what free speech she had left to attack Big Pharma, and she has done more constructive work to not just attack Big Pharma, but to conclusively prove that they have been complicit in the crime of this century. And I think that's the deciding factor in terms of uniting people, I agree, of common sense across the political spectrum. And I grew up with teachers in my high school who were part of the 60s. And they all agreed, though, that free speech was something that we just can't walk away from. And I remember I was probably the only real political conservative in my class. Nobody else gave a damn. I grew up in Vancouver Island. Half the class was stoned. But when the teacher said something controversial, they would always point to me and say, David, what do you think of that? Do you have a counter opinion to that? Because they believed in free speech. It was important to them. Dialogue, discourse, debate, argument was vital to who they were and how they thought. And then that was a legacy from the 60s for them. The left today is increasingly against any notion of free speech, but we still know that there are people who have that very vital sense of common sense in their heads and can actually still reason in terms of what is best for everybody in our society. We need to have the ability to disagree. And without that disagreement, we have no freedom. And I think free speech is ultimately the unifying area of concern. And I think that's how we reach out to people we shouldn't necessarily see as our political enemies, but people who simply disagree with us on some other points. But we can find commonality on some very foundational issues that are vital to our democracy. And if we can survive as a democracy, as a free country, I'm not sure we can anymore in Canada, but that hasn't stopped me from reaching out to people who at one time I would not have talked to, because I would have said, I have nothing in common with this person. And why would I want a discourse? Because it's just going to devolve into or deteriorate into an argument. But that's not how I think anymore. And I actively reach out to people who at one time I would not have talked to find that commonality.
That's awesome. And I think a lot of us need to do more of that. And I think this is exactly what Nico is trying to do with his show and other shows. Now, Chet, I'm going to go to you next. You've been on my show several times, and we've kind of touched on this, how mocking and comedy is a good way to use your free speech and get effective results from that. What are your thoughts, sir?
Yes. The best way to defeat a tyrant is make him look like a fool. Like the comedy and like dark humor and stuff, like not only will it help you get through hard times, but it's one of the best weapons you can wield. And I agree with what David had to say. Like free speech has to be the most. You have to start there anyway. And like if you go back 10 years, and like I haven't changed all that much. I got a little older, but like 10 years ago, I would have been considered somebody that you would say is left wing. Like something along the lines of a classical liberal and libertarian. But by today's standards, I'm like a super mega fascist ultra Nazi or something ridiculous. But one thing that is worth pointing out, and it's kind of slipped under the radar, and not a lot of people have noticed this, but there's already stuff in legislation that went into place in the last few years to censor people. It's particularly in the healthcare field. It's particularly in Nova Scotia and in BC, and I think a few other places, but those two in particular. And like they're taking away the regulatory college's ability to self-regulate the profession, and it's all kind of being consolidated under legislation. And like if you do anything that's unbecoming, which isn't defined, you can face fines of $2,000 in prison time. Like that's already in effect. Those laws are they're in. They've been there for 2 years now. So that's why don't you see a lot of healthcare providers saying much anymore? It's because, well, they can go to prison now. It's the free speech thing is the most important, but it's already part of it's already gone. I don't know how you roll that back either, because it seems, at least out here on the East Coast, it seems like everybody's in lockstep with what the liberals are doing, and it's like it's like you're in like, it's like everyone's brainwashed. It's like people that I knew my whole life and just went off the deep end. So I don't know how we pull them back, because in the end you kind of need everybody, or most of them, to make this work. And if we don't have them, it's a lot harder for us to push that boulder up the hill.
Vlad, as we're being bombed with these dialectical bombs, is there a way to find common ground where we get critical mass, or is that kind of part of the plan?
So first, I'd like to just build on what the last two gentlemen said, perhaps especially David. I want to riff on something David said. Let's go back to the blue pill, red pill analogy. So the red pill are the people that woke up and they understand what's true and they see what's actually going on around them. So if we go back to the movie, you might remember that when he took the red pill, he woke up naked in a pit of slime in a world that had been destroyed, and found himself on a tiny little kind of a ship where you'd only survive in a few square feet. Life was just horrible. And one of the other people on a ship was feverishly trying to find a way to take the blue pill again and go back, right? So why bring that up? Because the red pill reality is difficult. Those of us that live in it are frightened and deeply concerned, and we see what's coming and people won't listen to us, right? So how does this relate to the free speech thing? The blue pill people that we try to talk to are going to try to find solutions from within the system, which is the problem. An example would be the hate speech dialectic, or the dialectical bomb. So people who think that the government can fix these problems by limiting what can be said. And I find that to be astonishing, because, again, speaking dialectically, every single time the government takes more power to itself, it is not in the interests of the people at all. It is in the interests of state power and forcing a narrative on the people, forcing one that's untrue. But I mean, if anybody cares to, the book 1984, which if you haven't read it for a long time, read it again. But at the end of it, there's an essay Orwell wrote on Newspeak, where he specifically talks about the language. And he says, the word freedom in his essay on free speech, the word freedom will still exist. The word freedom will be there, but the concept of political freedom will be evaporated from public consciousness. Freedom will mean this field is free of mice. But the concept of being politically free will have been obliterated from human consciousness. And that is what is happening now. We are memory holding, to use another Orwellian term, a ton of truth about our own history and our own past. We're creating fictions that people must believe and that have real consequences, like the grades at the residential schools. They weren't there. But the consequences of that narrative are massive. And it also goes to negating the concept that we have any right to determine who lives in this country, right? So freedom of speech. The idea that most people are still believing that the state has the right to implement limits on what you can say, or in the name of hate speech, which is maybe the worst, most odious kind of dialectic, right? Because the state is the determiner of what's hate speech and selectively applies it to their purpose, which is never ours. And you can't talk people out of it. Even people that are being directly destroyed by that same concept at the moment, you can't. They just think it needs to be tweaked. They don't get it. That we have to limit state power. We have to convince people to limit state power. And Canadians, I don't know, man. I don't I mean, I'm going to keep on trying my best, like all of you, and so many more. But I don't really hold out a lot of hope.
Jeff?
I mean, I'm hopeful. I think maybe I'm the most hopeful guy here, ironically enough. Kind of looking at a few of these battles and saying, I think we're winning. I talk a lot about the cycle of history and the fact that we're in a fourth turning right now. And it is a temporary state of affairs. And don't forget that we have the most conservative generation in Canadian history for their age still in school right now. So if we adults here can mitigate enough damage between now and about 2030, 2032, once that generation ages into the electorate and starts getting red pilled as to exactly how abused they've been throughout the last several years, especially during COVID and with the trans agenda. I think that, the rise of the detransitioners is already happening, and a lot of them are waking up. And they're already polling like they're never going to vote Liberal once they age into the electorate. So we're going to see the pendulum is going to swing back in a few years, and is swinging back before our very eyes, on certain issues. Like they're still doing the gun grab stuff and everything like that. But it just seems like a lot of it is theater, whereas people are discussing, mainstream politicians are seriously discussing Castle Doctrine. So we kind of went from this unanimity around, taking all the guns to all of a sudden, you guys should have some guns. So we're starting to see these signs of a shift. And I do like the analogy of the Matrix. And I often say that there's kind of like an inception element to the Matrix where you don't kind of wake up all at once. For some people, like maybe on a particular issue, the top is still spinning on the table, whereas in mine, it stopped years ago. And maybe a better way to say it is like Neo doesn't turn into kung fu see through the Matrix superhero right away. Like he's weak when he first wakes up. So a lot of people, I think, who are kind of newly awakened don't really see through the Matrix just yet. They just know that this reality is false. And the real reality, of course, is very scary and hard. Some of, I think, what Vlad was referencing in Orwell's essay there has not so much taken place in the way that he said it would, but has effectively, I think, has us trapped in this kind of Orwellian paradigm where when I hear people discussing freedom, and this is one of the points that I really try to drive home with the action that I took going into the woods, was people, like when you have a discussion about freedom with a normie, they'll say, well, you can do this and you can do that, as if that is freedom, but they're conflating freedom with permission. So people already believe that freedom means permission. It doesn't mean permission. Freedom means, Friedrich Hayek put it best when he said that what we mean when we say a free society is that it is free of coercion. So, in a free society, the guiding mantra is do as you will, but don't harm another. But we've shifted into a society where the guiding mantra is do as I say or else. It's far more authoritarian. So that's the principle. That's the line that's been crossed in the last several years between freedom and authoritarianism. And I do think that paradigm shift really has kind of already taken place in the minds of Canadians, where they're conflating freedom and permission. So we're already kind of through that Rubicon. But in terms of reaching a lot of these people, I agree that the free speech issue is something that is foundational to both the left and the right. And also I would throw in bodily autonomy, because I know, Naomi Wolf, for example, is somebody who batters on about that quite a bit. And I agree that is another indicator that there is room for optimism. There's room for hope here, because we have examples we can point to, like Naomi Wolf, who used to be a pretty rabid third wave feminist. She first really kind of broke onto the scene with The Beauty Myth. That was her big book in the beginning. And her basic thesis was that the global patriarchy is convening once a year to pass resolutions to order men to pretend to like large breasts in order to keep women oppressed. And she went from that level of insanity to, where she is now. I think that's a pretty incredible awakening. And, if somebody like Naomi Wolf can do it, then there's hope for others as well. But it's a cult. That's what a totalitarian country really is. It's a cult where, basically they've put the state in place of God. They've filled the God-shaped hole in the human heart with the state, or essentially with the state's dogma as the state gospel. That is their one true gospel, and that's why they get triggered when you say the truth. It's the blasphemy reaction, and they just cry heresy and go for the pitchforks. So they're in a cult, and the first thing you need to do to get somebody unbrainwashed from a cult is separate them from the cult. That's a real challenge for us because the whole country is the cult. So how do you get them out? Well, you destroy the cult. You go after, you cut the snake off the head. You get a proper change in government where, I'm going to say we get a legit right-wing government in there, not kind of this controlled opposition stuff. But anyway, yeah, that is the way I think we separate people from the cult, is we basically do what the communists did, and we, become the cultural hegemony, as Antonio Gramsci would have put it.
And to kind of directly answer a couple part of your questions there, Nico, because you and I had a conversation earlier, which is what can we do before the laws come in? Is there a way to stop them? And how do we get common ground? And then I want to touch on the cult one, because Jeff, Alberta may have a solution for Albertans at least to get out of that cult. It might be on the horizon.
Leave Canada.
Well, he said leave the cult, so let's just make that the mantra now. But there was 2 times recently that I want to talk to you about, Nico, about when I thought we were going to get there. The first one was when the vax was coming out, and I thought all the your body, your choice people would line up with the your body, your choice people and the vax. But we saw very quickly it wasn't really, that was going to happen. The your body, your choice before the vax people kind of went silent. They went and stood in line. Suddenly their body autonomy wasn't so important to them anymore. I guess they're worried about grandma more than her own body. So I was disappointed that there wasn't an alignment there that was strong enough to go ahead and push against this, because I thought there could be one. Because again, it's the same issue. Do you have choice for your body? And they didn't. They kind of just completely dropped the ball, went away, cowered away, and 80% of Canada got behind that. The other more recent one was the free speech one. So when Jimmy Kimmel was canceled, suddenly that entire side goes, oh, wait, you can't say whatever you want anymore. So I thought, oh, okay, well, here we go. This might be another opportunity for a bunch of unity in the middle, at least, around free speech. Now they finally understand the consequences to losing speech. They're losing their jobs. All this stuff is happening. And then Jimmy Kimmel, one of their saviors, was losing his as well. I thought for sure this might be a good opportunity for these two sides to come together on one issue, free speech. And unfortunately, what we saw there was he got his job back, and then he's back, and they kind of went away. I wonder if, some of the string pullers started to see that, wait a minute, this is unifying a large middle group here, because this is not what they want with a dialectical approach here with Marxism. And they can't have us agreeing on stuff. So he got his show back, and that issue just kind of went away. Because I think you're correct, Nico. What we need is a critical mass of common people coming together to fight a common issue. And will it be something like hate speech? Well, I don't think so, when one side is controlling the definition of hate speech and they're absolutely fine with that definition. And they're seeing people, if we don't use pronouns, going to jail. So that was kind of like a good test to find out whether or not there's going to be anybody that stands up for that. And when they saw that their side are the ones controlling the definition of hate, controlling the definition of the laws, they're not going to stand up on that. One issue that I think is still on the table, though, is children. The children issue. So we saw the Million Person March come together. This was before we saw 10-9 or 10-7 or whatever, and really changed the conversation out there. But for a little while there, in Canada, coast to coast, we came together for the children in a very meaningful way. Religion took a backstage, politics took a backstage, and we all focused on children. So whether it's going to be body autonomy, whether it's going to be speech, or it's going to be children, there's got to be an issue that we can all get behind. And if there's not, Vlad, he says the airplane's already 10 miles away dropping new bombs. That might be correct. So I'm not sure. And then to answer the first question I was going to tackle last, what can we do before the laws come in place? You can't protest. That's not effective. We're not going to burn down anything. That's not effective. But I don't know. I think what Jeff has done is probably the only path forward, and that's after the law came in. Because what Jeff was doing last year is he went into court to try and fight it. Didn't work because he didn't have monetary, penalties for it. Then he had to wait for the order to come in again before he can go into the woods to go ahead and get a ticket to go ahead and fight it from the inside. He couldn't do it before the order was down, and he couldn't do it if he wasn't ticketed. We had to kind of figure out how to play go against the government on this one. And hopefully he's going to be successful in that, because that could probably end the whole idea that the province can go ahead and put in orders like these in place. God willing that's the case. But to answer your question, what to do, I really don't have an answer anymore, man. Like we were talking about this afternoon. Like, what can we do as Canadians to come together to preemptively stop these things? I don't know if there's a solution, brother.
I absolutely love this conversation, by the way. This was not supposed to happen, but I feed off of what people say. So here we are. But what you just said, Jason, I want to address it because you and I have spoken about this. I spoke about this on the show with Rob, my my anti-woke liberal co-host. But you know what happened to Charlie Kirk? As devastating as it was, I think he's going to have more impact in his afterlife than he did that he could have ever had during his lifetime. And when I first saw this happen, and we went live and we talked about it, I thought it would further divide the left from the right. I thought the gap that's already there would get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But with those woke individuals that celebrated his death online finally getting consequences for their speech, it seemed that it segregated the left from the woke. So it seemed that for the first time in a very long time, I've seen a crack between lefties, and they started looking at the woke like, you guys are fucking insane. How can you celebrate a guy that got killed for speaking? He didn't do anything violent. He just used words. And I believe, and I like that David Krayden was talking about Naomi Wolf, because I thought, after a conversation, I continued thinking about what are the solutions that we can have here. And I think that what I do every day by recording with a leftist atheist as a conservative Christian and creating that civil discourse is how we need to do it. Like I was telling you that earlier, but I was flown to San Francisco last month to go debate a lesbian mother. And it was basically the conversation around, should gay people be able to adopt? And I said, no, I don't think you guys should be able to adopt because it's not the best for the kids. So that was the conversation. We fully knew, the guy that brought me there fully knew that 50% of the comments would be terrible towards me because I didn't mince my word. I was polite, but I said exactly what I meant. And turns out that he keeps on texting me some text that he's taking from the comment section, because when I didn't post the content, I don't interact with the comments because I don't control the platform, and I don't feel like reading thousands of comments that are just hateful towards me. But the point is that there's a lot of comments coming from extremely left individuals. We're talking San Francisco here. The audience of that show is extremely woke. Yet there's a lot of comments, and my wife confirms she likes to see the interviews that I do on other people's platforms, and it seems that the civil discourse is taking place even with the woke, because a lot of the comments are saying, as much as I don't agree with Nico, I'm happy that he went on the show and spoke about his views, that finally somebody opens that conversation between the two perceived extreme and allow for civil discourse, just like I do every day with my co-host. And I think, at least in my opinion, the way that we can go and have the common sense individuals out there, whoever their political affiliations are, to take that red pill, is to us as conservative first. Like Jeff mentioned, I talk about this all the time, but we need a real conservative movement in Canada, because our big C conservative are just liberals in blue. They're not conservative at all. Pierre Poilievre's a leftist. He's the equivalent of the Democrats in the US. That's number one. We need real conservatism in Canada, but that's not going to be enough to convince the lefties, the common sense lefties, that we do have a point when it comes to free speech, but I think the only way to do it is to do what like I do every day and interact with more lefties. Try to find the Naomi Wolf that are currently on the left that will be ready to have that civil discourse and have the balls, the courage to share that freedom of speech is the most important right that we have. And it is not a permission, it is not a privilege. This is a God-given right. So I believe that it is up to us to reach out, as conservatives, to reach out on the other side of the aisle and say, we need to do something together. We need to fight this together, or else nothing else matters at this point. We might as well just leave Canada right now.
So, David, let's jump to you here again on this one, because again, I don't know about your schedule, but we're getting close to the end of the show anyways. But what are your thoughts there about reaching out to the left, Naomi Wolf, others? And you admitted this is a conversation you weren't going to have before, but now you do. You think that is going to be a path forward for a lot more people? And are we going to be able to get access to people who are still on the left that want to talk?
As long as people can think, I think we have some opportunity. We have some hope. Where there's life, there's hope. Where there's thought, there's hope. And I couldn't agree more with Nico. We need to reach out to people in civility. One of the things I find most disturbing about political debate today, and it's been this way for decades now, is that it's just so violently angry. It is just so upset. And I grew up with William F. Buckley Jr. and the civility of that kind of interview, where he could have somebody on the stage with him that he was diametrically opposed to philosophically and politically, but treat the person with respect. And they could have a wonderful discourse going back and forth. Now I think we need to see more of that. One thing you said, Jason, about the children. And once again, I participated as a leader in the Million People March for Children this year. In fact, it was a week ago today. And we didn't get the numbers we got 2 years ago. Yes, thanks to that goddamn war in the Middle East, which we're all being played for and we're all being played with. And this has done so much to divide the faith community in Canada. And prior to that damn war breaking out, we were seeing unity amongst Christians, Muslims, and Jews, and it was tremendous. The work was fantastic. I want to see a return to that. I want to see that damn war over. And I want to see Canadian Christians, Canadian Muslims, and Canadian Jews unite over what's really important, over what's happening here in Canada, against what this liberal tyranny is doing to our children in Canada. And I think that is going to be another source of unity, bringing people together over what's really, really important.
God bless you for that one. Chet, you're the youngest one on this panel, it appears, probably by a few years here. What are your thoughts about getting the young people involved in this more in conversation? So what are your thoughts about, civil dialogue conversations, what Charlie Kirk was trying to do? Are we going to be able to amplify that? Is there a million Charlie Kirks now?
I'm not as young as I look, believe it or not.
You're still maybe the youngest on this panel.
Yeah, I'm the youngest one here, but I'm not as young as I look. Yeah, and it's that's hard for me to kind of answer because, like I said, I'm not as young as I look. And I don't know. I don't know how. When I was growing up, anyway, like there's always this kind of pushback against the older generations. That's kind of the way it always goes. But what's fortunately for us now, being more conservative in nature is now what's punk rock, right? And so like you see kids kind of drifting that way anyways, especially the more they realize that they've been screwed over. Because like I'm an older millennial, and like my generation is screwed, and the one after us is screwed too. And people are slowly starting to wake up and like seeing like, oh, we're Fox, and then realizing who was at the helm of the ship and what we kind of need to do. So I think some of it's going to happen naturally, but like personally, I don't know how to reach like to the younger people because I'm not a young guy anymore. But what we do need to do, and to just build on what David said, is in the discourse you need to extend a hand, not raise your fist. It's something that me and Alex Cabana talked about back in the day. He's one of the guys from B4F. It's like that's what we need to do. Is he's like, because like the people, like the people that are kind of brainwashed by what the media and social media are telling them, like they're in trouble too. They just don't realize it yet. And so, like at some point, when they kind of wake up that they're sinking in the ocean, we kind of need to be there to pull them in the lifeboat, not to go, screw you, man. Otherwise, because we won't get through this unless we all kind of get through it. Because if the longer we all stay divided, the easier it is for this place to collapse, right?
And Vlad, is this a path forward? Are the children, not only do we protect them, but are the next generation, are they going to be the ones that fight? After Charlie Kirk's death, I think it was 120,000 chapters now have been asked to be set up. This is going all over the place. He was hoping to get, I think, 5,000 in his organization. Is 120,000 the last number I saw. Is the universities, high schools, is this where the battle is going to be? Because this is where they're attacking children too, as young as 5, for sexualization, indoctrination, confusion, other things. Is this where the battle is going to be? And what is the Achilles heel for the Marxist dialectic plan?
Well, in the United States, obviously, right? I mean, in Trump's first term, one of the things he did was tie funding. First of all, again, I'm going to quote Stephen Coughlin when he said that the greatest mistake Reagan made is when he promised to completely get rid of the entire Department of Education, and then he didn't do it. And that's absolutely true. The state has no business funding education. And that's why we're the place we're in. And to know that, to understand that, read Bella Dodd's book, School of Darkness, who was a communist activist that created unions, that funneled state funding into communist organizations through universities, through schools, right? Okay. But anyway, so yes, in the United States, a reclaiming of the universities is the way they're going to be able to turn it around. So, but I'd like to just say a couple of things about what to watch for. In Canada, we don't have that option. We've lost all control of all the schools, lost it, right? But something to look out for is the very carefully crafted narrative attacks on Charlie Kirk and on his widow, which I'm seeing everywhere. I saw a weird one this morning. This guy produced a video where he said the whole Charlie Kirk assassination was done in a 1998 movie, where the guy named Charles Kirkson or Kirkland was shot. I went up and watched about half the movie after this guy. He's lying about most of it. Yes, the guy named Charles Kirkland got shot in the neck. And yes, that from an assassin, that's true. But all the other stuff and the details he said in the movie were lies. Why? Because they're trying to take away the martyrdom aspect of it. They're trying to make a conspiracy where none exists in order to negate the value to us of the assassination, if you know what I mean by value. I mean it in the right, as a martyr, the martyrdom aspect of it gone. And I look at what they're saying about his widow. They're trying to find any opportunity, any single frame of a 10-minute video where she has an expression on her face that isn't one of abject grief, and try to make it look like somehow this same video claimed that she's wearing Masonic rings. Like, the point is that serious effort, much like during COVID, people who appear to be kind of on our side of things are being planted on social media, Rumble and YouTube and X, and presenting narratives that actually dissolve the important truths in order to. And so what I'm arguing is that, in fact, the divide between those of us who appreciate it Charlie Kirk and his message, and those who didn't remains and will be widened in some cases. But as you point out, there's an awful lot of new requests for chapters all over the place. Let's see how that goes. I mean, in the States, I hold out a lot more hope because they come from a tradition of freedom of speech and for fighting for freedom. That is their origin story, right? It is not ours. Ours is peace, order, and good government, whatever that means, okay? So the second thing would be the memory hole of things that people say that are valuable. There's a book called The River Wars by Winston Churchill. And in that book, there's 3 paragraphs where he describes in his own experience the nature of Islam as a culture. And it isn't very pleasant, but it's very accurate. And those in the newest editions of that book, they're gone. They have memory holed what Churchill had to say. If they can do that to him in the United Kingdom, imagine what they can do to Charlie Kirk and ours. We've already seen it on CBC, CTV, and CGO and Global. They're completely fictionalized things that he said. So, I guess I'm just saying we have to really, really watch out for the narrative attacks coming from all sides, and as much from people who would claim to be one of us as from the mainstream media, because it's a very, very really big problem. There were people during the COVID and the vaccine era that appeared out of nowhere that had 1 million followers on Rumble and were bringing on the worst nutcase people. He'd have great people on too, but he'd have the great people on in order to diminish them next to the nut bars he would bring in with ludicrous theories about the vaccines in order to make it all look stupid, in order to look any counter narrative to the vaccines look like nut bar conspiracy theories. Classic dialectical tactic, classic communist information warfare, political warfare strategy. Make what's true look stupid by putting it next to something that really is stupid.
Jeff, next one's to you here, bud. So you talk about the fourth turning a lot. You talk about how the next 12 to 18 months or so could be the climax of that, and then there's a turning point. Is Kirk probably one of these? Is it the young people, the next little graduation classes of the next couple of years? Are those guys going to be the ones that are pushing forward? And when you say, this battle was put on a shelf, that's not one of the main ones. What is some of the main battles you think we should be focusing?
I think that Vlad was pretty spot on when he started talking about the Centuries Initiative. I mean, it's actually much bigger than the Centuries Initiative, but that's a good place for Canadians to focus. And really, when we're talking about like whatever it is that they're trying to do, these authoritarian measures, whatever they're bringing in next, it'll be much easier to do when they have a lot more people here who grew up in authoritarian countries. So like that's kind of the signal through the noise, I think. When it comes to the divide, like this is also, I think, Vlad, I think you're pretty spot on. Like a lot of this is orchestrated. And October 7th has been used in that manner. And we know that, like the Network Contagion Research Institute, they published that report showing that these narratives, specifically false flag narratives, are being driven by Russian, Chinese, and Iranian bot farms. And I can remember, like, even when the bombs were being dropped on Fort O, like, of course, you had China coming in, trying to scare everybody away. And you had these Pakistani accounts posting things like, I'm an American veteran, I'm not having my son go off and die for Israel. So like the woke right effectively is the product of a foreign funded psyop. And we can see like they're radical. They will not tolerate any other perspectives, no dissent from their own view, and everybody must believe what they believe. So it's not that they're right wing. I don't like the term. It's just the one that got traction with James Lindsay. I think they're totalitarian and collectivist. There's nothing right wing about them. And a lot of them probably came from the left that were against the mandates, this kind of thing. So it's going to take us a while to sort this mess out. But the divide is being driven by our foreign adversaries. And it's making it really hard for us to come together on this, because we're living in separate realities on this one issue. And so even if we do focus on the children, we see faith communities, that are all interested in this, it's like they're not going to work together anymore. So it seems like maybe we need to switch tactics in that regard too. And again, I'm going to plug my approach of individual action, especially something that gets you into their system and lets you beat them at their own game, like a court proceeding, like the one that I'm doing. There are other complaint mechanisms that we can, we can avail ourselves of as well. And, a lot of what we're seeing around the Charlie Kirk, I was just talking about this on the call that Nico mentioned yesterday, because when I started talking about what happened with Charlie Kirk and how we have this problem with radicalism, when we started this particular roundtable talking about Antifa, this problem with radicalism that we have and how this kid was a radical, and he was, especially with the trans agenda, and he had the Chow Bella, and actually Chet really got me smart on the different Antifa and gamer references that he had engraved onto his bullet casings, how they're using the gamer community. They're infiltrating that through Discord, and with China buying up all the gaming companies under Tencent. And, so they're going after the gamer community. I tried to talk about that. That's a real problem. That's something that we need to address, like yesterday. And the first person that chimes in after me is like, you have to go watch this video by Stu Peters, because they shot him with his Israel shot him with his lapel mic. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, you're talking about, a bullet that will not fit inside that mic, first of all. But it's a red herring. It's intended to take us off the real issue, and also to delegitimize authorities. So now it's like, no matter what the police, the FBI, anybody is saying, they're all captured. They're all working for the other side. If they say something that goes against this woke narrative about lapel mics in Israel, then they're part of the conspiracy now. So it's really hard. This is why I make it an issue. Everybody's always like, hey, Jeff, shut up, like you're destroying unity on the right, because we all agree about Israel being the number one enemy and stuff like this. I'm like, no, like we have real threats that we should be talking about. But the reason that I address this is because it's an internal cohesion issue for us, and it is the product of a foreign funded psyop. So we're under attack. We're taking casualties, and I'm just trying to say, guys, get out of the way of the line of fire, okay? Because that's what's happening. Is this is part of the psychological attack? So, and Yuri Bezmenov said when we reach the final stages of ideological subversion that we would be unable to draw sensible conclusions in our own defense. And so here we are. We have a real problem with radicalism. And it's like, we can't even talk about it. We can't draw sensible conclusions in our own defense to address this issue, because we got to spend all this time, debunking Jewish space lasers.
And Nico, you know this well, that at least for me and you, because we come out and we talk about Pierre and other stuff, the right is just as vicious as the left, if not sometimes more. And I hate this whole left and right thing, because it kind of puts you into a team and saying our side, all that kind of stuff. And I really don't agree with that stuff anymore. I like to be, asking questions. And as soon as you ask a question, you can be shut down pretty quick. We're seeing this happen with the ostrich issue here. And I'm going to kind of bring that up a little bit here. You and I spent like a week digging into all the information. Okay. Digging, going past the TikTok posts and going into even the counter information, like stuff that doesn't make it look good or it's not flattering. And we're digging around, looking at it all with the purpose of trying to figure out what is actually going on. And as soon as I had an interview, and I just did an interview with one of the experts who was not allowed to speak in the court, and boy, that was shocking to hear why that happened, I started to get hit again. I was getting hit by a whole bunch of what was clearly bots that were happening because they had the same messages. What about the food? What about the dirty conditions? Things that don't matter. And this is happening amongst people that I thought were truly trying to find the truth, or truly trying to figure out what's going on. And it's really getting annoying when you don't know who your allies can be. And this is another conversation you and I had, is who can we trust? Like when we are searching on one issue and we're like, oh, we align here, this vax, they say, okay, it's a poison and all that kind of stuff. And then you bring a different issue to them. It's like, wow, like suddenly I'm your enemy because I asked a question or two. I just went through that entire cycle again this last week, and it's still happening. It's still happening in my DMs, and I'm still getting emails and stuff like that. So when I'm hearing Jeff talk, and there's a push from some foreign influence and that stuff, like talking about Russia, China, others, maybe he's absolutely right. Maybe these are plants. And when we hear things come out of the U.S. like, it's confirmed now, 500 FBI agents were trying to convince people to go into the Capitol, and now it's coming out that that was actually a thing. Even though when you said it back then, you were a conspiracy theorist, you were crazy, couldn't be, but now it's coming out. But maybe Jeff's absolutely right. There's a whole bunch of people who are working for other powers that are trying to infiltrate, plant, get involved into our efforts. Because if I had $1 for every time I was called a Fed, I probably wouldn't have to ask for people to become members, because I get called that all the time. And it's just going to kind of close on this one for you, Nico. When I first got into this in 2022, I thought there were Feds everywhere, because I was hearing those videos. I wasn't talking to people yet. I was just looking at videos and hearing videos. And then when I started to talk to people, and then I got called one, I'm like, wait a minute. This is like a derogatory term that people use to try and shut down and cancel people. It doesn't mean they're a Fed, but if you say that, it's a way to kind of cancel you or shut you down. So then at that point, I shifted my mind. I said, okay, well then nobody's a Fed. Okay, let's pretend nobody's a Fed. But then I listened to Jeff, and it makes a lot of sense that absolutely there's going to be powers outside of Canada, wherever they're originating from, who's going to infiltrate and go ahead and do that. You're going to think they're an ally. You're going to line on a bunch of issues. And then, boom, they're going to bring forward radical ideas and try and really discourage you and then divide you. And again, with Vlad, when Vlad says they're dropping bombs, sometimes they look like friendly bombs until they blow up in front of you. But you and I have gone through this many, many times. And even just our conversation today was who can we trust and who are actually fighting the battles with us. And I think that's a difficult thing. And Jeff highlights how it's probably by design.
It is by design, but I'm not even sure if the people realize that they're doing it. Because I literally know probably 95% of the biggest content creators in Canada when it comes to the conservative movement. I've had relationship with them. I've created content with them. But as soon as I started talking against Pierre Poilievre during the last election, they all ghosted me. They don't have the balls to come after me directly, because I would eat them alive. That wouldn't be, you don't want to give me that spot. Don't give me your spotlight. I'm going to make you look stupid for what you are. But the point in the matter is that the right is as bad as the left is when it comes to walking that political line. And this is the big problem that I'm seeing with even right here. Mr. Doctor is saying earlier that this kind of weak mentality is what led us to this mess in the first place, naivety. And he's referring to me wanting to extend the olive branch to the common sense individuals. I'll never try to convince a woke individual that I'm right. Never going to happen. I know where I can spend my time. That's not where I'm going to spend it. But at the same time, his solution, because I kept on asking, like I've been chatting with him in the chat, his solution is to vote Pierre Poilievre in power. But that's my point. I'm like, I see all of your faces on the panel, like, eeh. So no disrespect to you, Mr. Doctor. You're a follower of mine, and you're always on my show, and I love your comments. I love the discourse. But at the end of the day, it's kind of naive for you to call me naive, and then to turn around and say that Pierre Poilievre is the answer when he is a liberal. So basically, we should reach out to liberals, is what you're saying, because he is a liberal. He's not a conservative. But I'm just puzzled right now because, as you said, who can you trust? Because that's my biggest problem. I'm used to creating content by myself. I've created a massive audience by myself with the help of nobody else. But now, in order for us to fight the free speech attack that we're seeing left, right, and center, this is the hill I'm going to die on. How can we make this a movement? Because, Jeff, I want to disagree with you, but I think that you're right when you say that protesting in the street might not be the most effective of strategies anymore. But at the same time, I don't really feel like spending the rest of my life in prison and wait for those bills to come in. Like, I would like to see my son grow up. Like, I'd like to see it with my own eyes, be there every day. I don't necessarily want to be that martyr that's going to spend, because it's one thing to get hit with $28,000 It's another thing to be hit with life in prison, because those censorship bill is what we're looking at now. Life is in the mix of Bill C9. It is a possibility now. And you know that the Bill C63 is going to push that narrative even further down the road. But how do we do it? Because you have people on the right that don't like me anymore. The people on the left don't like me. So what do we do to unify common sense individuals? Because I know they exist. I've spoken to them. I know them. So how do we do it? No, you can't, Vlad. No, you can't. We can't even tell if you're here or not. Are you with us?
Sorry, I mean, look, with short notice, if you guys ever want me to do this with you again, I'll set up a proper camera and a proper background.
I'm just fucking with you. It's awesome that you keep on. Hello.
Yeah, I know. So look, I'd like to just address what you said directly and then address what you said completely indirectly. Okay. First of all, the answer to the question that's the theme of the show lies in game theory, that individuals will stand up and will fight oppression when the perceived cost to them is higher of not fighting oppression than it is of okay. It's really simple. When an individual feels that the cost of not fighting it is higher than the cost of fighting it, that's when they fight it. Okay. Now, so that's the real answer. It has nothing to do with freedom of speech, because guys like us care about that. Most people don't, right? What they care about is what they see and what they feel on their own. So that's a direct answer. Here's the indirect answer. I've been watching stuff, and I'm not suggesting a course of action for anybody who may be watching. I'm just telling a story from my experience, okay? So of 18 years of trying to watch everything that goes on, there was this thing called the Arab Spring. Was probably an Obama/CIA event, but it was interesting anyway. And when it reached Egypt, which is like the second last stop, the Egyptians took to the streets by the million, and they stayed there for weeks. The army came out, and at a certain point, the army changed sides and joined the protesters and overthrew Mubarak and put in this guy named Mohammed Morsi. He was an odious, awful character that Obama wanted in. He was head of the Muslim Brotherhood, which I think the United States is on the verge of making a terrorist entity. Hallelujah, hallelujah. But they put in Mohammed Morsi through some fake elections, which Obama was very good at. And the Egyptians tolerated that for about a year. But as the country became more and more of a Sharia country, and it became more chaotically violent and sadistically violent, the people in Egypt took to the streets organically by the millions. This was not part of the plan, the Arab Spring plan. And the Egyptians took to the streets, and the army came out again. And after several weeks of the second series of protests, they threw out Mohammed Morsi. They put him in jail, and they put in a guy named al-Sisi, who the Egyptians seem to be perfectly happy with. And al-Sisi essentially restored, this gets complicated, so I'm going to say essentially restored a more or less republic nature, not a democracy where they vote for who's going to oppress them, but put in a dictator that more or less established institutions of state that more or less were equitable, had some equality to it. Okay? So I'm just saying it's interesting that when enough people hit the streets long enough, the results are inevitable. Not saying. But I do wonder, though, why the police had to be brought in from elsewhere and stomp on the Freedom Convoy so hard. But not that I'm saying those events are connected.
What's happening in Nepal right now, Vlad?
No idea. Sorry, not watching.
I think the same thing's happening there, because they're revolting and starting all over again after they had the democracy try and it didn't work after they got rid of a monarch. Maybe take a look at Nepal. I think they're going through that right now, but Egypt just did. Chet, do you want to comment on this? And we're also wrapping up here. We're getting to our last 8 minutes here, so maybe some final comment from you, Chet.
I was just going to comment on what Jeff had said and kind of like what you and I were talking about. Like the shooting of Charlie Kirk and the ICE thing, and they're trying to, give you like the red herring, or I forget the other term that they use it for it. They try to like, oh, this person played video games this much and whatnot. It's not video games that are radicalizing kids. I've played video games for nearly 40 years, and I play much more violent stuff than those guys ever did. And the thing is you've got like radical groups or Asian provocateurs that enter into the group chats in like Discord or on Steam or whatnot. It's like, and that's where they target them and they feed them the messaging there. It's not really in the video games itself. They enter into the community around it, and they do that because that's where the kids are and the young people are. If they're all hanging out at the bowling alley, they'd go radicalize them there. But it's, especially because over COVID, everyone got driven online. No one got to hang out, and you've got kids that missed pretty well most of high school. And so you had kids that, lived on the internet more so than they've ever had. And so, easy pickings. So like, that's what's happening. And it's like, I've seen some of like what Jeff had said with like the ridiculous things coming around the shooting. It's like the last 5 years have rotted everyone's brain. Like the purpose of telling lies, not that you'll believe them, is they keep telling lies so you'll never know what's true. And that's what's happened, is you're just being bombarded with lies and lies and lies. And then people that I know that are very, very smart, and because there's so much lying and propaganda in the last number of years that they assume everything is lies and propaganda now. And it's like a trauma response, right? And I don't blame everybody for it, but it's what's been done to you, right? You've got people caught in a trauma response from these last number of years, and that's derailing the conversation too, because you can't think rationally when you're caught in that trauma response.
Jeff, you've seen trauma. You probably dealt with a lot yourself, and you're doing a lot of work. What are your thoughts about what Chet said there?
Pretty spot on. And, that is how propaganda works. It manipulates your emotions. And, that's how they basically establish control, is they play with the survival instinct in particular. And everything becomes a matter of life or death. And that's a pretty traumatizing experience, of course. When they're deranged in this way, this is how they drive people to derangement: the fear, hate, and also shame. Shame is a big one because it is the most effective in terms of producing a depressed state in a person's mind, and that makes them more malleable because they're going to be looking for more approval in that state. So and I want to be clear, like that the people that we're dealing with, like some of them, again, I'll throw back to Vlad's analogy with the Matrix, where they're a little bit weak when they're waking up, and so it's really hard for them to kind of parse out. They don't see through the Matrix yet. Like they still get caught in some aspects of it. Like I said, it's going to take some time to sort this mess out. But when it comes to a lot of these people, again, we're talking about radicals. It's ideological capture. That's kind of the real issue. It's the brainwashing. And when I'm dealing with a radical, I know it's not possible to reach them. That seems to be the consensus, I think, here. But I think there are things that you can do. You're not going to reach across the aisle when it comes to a radical. Like, you're going to adapt different tactics. And I advocate for radical candor, where you have to hit them in the feels. You have to trigger them directly or deliberately. They're in this emotional fog. Fear, hate everywhere they go. And the only way to get them off of that, out of that fog, is to hit them in the feels. Trigger them deliberately, be as truthful, as nakedly truthful and candid as you can possibly be. Memorize a few logical fallacies. Like, that is the antidote to chaos. It's philosophy versus sophistry. It's always been this. battle. It just recurs every 4 generations, as I often talk about. So that's what we're going through. That's where we're in a kind of Orwellian paradigm right now. So that is the way forward, I think, is to get back to our roots as the West, to get back to Western civilization, and philosophy is our way. That we use that to guide us. And in terms of like how we build any consensus, like we're right wingers, we're not going to do that. We're not the hive mind like they have on the left. This is a disadvantage that we have, and I think the way to work within that framework is again through the individual action that I've already mentioned before. But when it comes to building a team, like you build your own team, you build a network. Don't worry about building a team. You build a network, and then there are people that you can work on for certain things. And then when it comes to other things that they're not so reliable on, then you can go to other people. And I try to think in those terms when it comes to trustworthiness and things like that. I try to think in terms of reliability instead of trustworthiness, because when I think of trustworthiness, that tends to be a lot more like holistic, all encompassing. Okay, this person isn't trustworthy, so I don't deal with them for anything. But really, I think what we're talking about most of the time is reliability. Some people are really smart in some areas and they're completely lost in others. So, I will try to, establish some kind of an expertise. How can I use this person on my network, not my team? It's my network. So I think that's the way forward. We're individualists. We got to embrace that. And the winning strategy is to find the common ground. And the more you work on that common ground, the more it tends to grow.
I like what you're saying there, and it's something that we talked about a little bit in Calgary when we were going through that We Unity event. It was a good effort, but I kind of made the comment on my show on Monday that the whole analogy, the left kind of just gets together and they don't care, but the right does, and it's kind of like herding cats. No, I think herding cats is a lot easier than trying to herd all conservatives together, because we really shouldn't. And I like what you did there. Create networks. Build it on expertise, find the people that can assist in certain areas and build it that way. And then also judge people by their actions and what they actually do, not by what they say, but what they actually do. And that's also where you can find some trust. Like if someone's being radical and not willing to move or not willing to understand or not willing to absorb more information, then that should be a big red flag for you. Sure. And Nico, you and I kind of went through that this last week, is building new networks, talking to new people, getting out there, getting more information, and then just kind of figuring out where we settle at the end of that. And it is an emotional roller coaster even for us, because we do care. But I like what you had to say there, Jeff, that we need to have conversations with them, trigger them, use emotions, use the truth, use the facts, use hard facts, and make sure that you have those conversations and continue with that. Nico, I also want to just take a quick moment here to recognize Dan Hartman. So just before this show, I came from a space where there's a lot of people grouping around to have support for him, because today is the 4-year anniversary of the death of his son, Sean Hartman. So that's another way we do this. Not only do we build our networks, but no matter what's going on, we should be able to drop everything and then go support one of our soldiers in need. He is an inspiration to a lot of people with his strength. He's continuing that fight where a lot of people would have given up, folded up, and left the battlefield. He is not, and he's fighting stronger than ever. So I just want to kind of highlight Dan Hartman today. 4 years ago, he lost Sean. And this is another way the conservatives are doing things. We may not always agree. There were people in there that you're not, that not necessarily you, but that I wouldn't sit down for a beer with, but I absolutely would sit down to support Dan for. And it was pretty nice to see a group come together and spend some time with Dan, because this is the kind of things we do. So Nico, we're just over time. I'm going to toss it to you, and maybe some closing comments from you as well, brother.
I don't have much to add except that I always enjoy those conversations. Agree, disagree. I absolutely love it. Jeff is like an encyclopedia every single time he shows up. So I'm not even sure he's real. I think he might be the bots we're talking about. He is the bot we're looking for. You are the bot we're looking for. But no, I enjoy these type of conversations. Absolutely enjoy it. So thank you to every single one of you that's on the panel, and thank you for all the comments. Thank you for all the viewers, because I think you guys don't get enough credit, because if it wasn't for you guys, none of us would be doing what we're doing right now. So the credit goes to you, but don't be scared to engage, because that's something we're very strong on my show. We want comments. We get hundreds, if not thousands of them every day, and that's what we want. We want to interact with you guys. So thanks to the panel, thanks to the commenters, and yeah, that's all I got.
Well, also thank you. I want to give a big thanks to everybody on the panel as well. So thank you to David for joining us today. Jeff, I always love to have you. I'm glad you're able to make it. Vlad, whether you're in focus or not, or there or not, you're still a genius. I love talking to you. Chet, you're amazing. Nico, you're quickly turning into a brother from another mother. And to everybody watching from the other channels, because there's a bunch of you from David's channel and Jeff's channel and stuff, give everybody a follow. We're going to come together and have conversations like this as well. So make sure you give everybody a follow, show a little bit of support, and remember, take care of each other is what we need to do. So thank you all for being here tonight. Get back to your Saturdays. Love you all. Good night.